The biggest misconception of the US was believing that a 50% tariff on India would cripple its economy. Washington was confident the pressure would work because, unlike China, India was seen as having no real economic leverage to retaliate. In reality, it was the US that had spent years building strong relations with India, and this single move pushed those ties back by nearly 2 decades. And the worst part is, the Trump administration doesn't even realize it. After failing to arm twist China, the US turned to India, believing that sanctioning New Delhi would pressure Putin into negotiations and allow Trump to claim victory. But this was pure fantasy. Putin's recent visit made one thing clear: instead of pushing India away from Russia, the US was driving India deeper into Russia's strategic orbit. Washington believed that tariffs, public criticism, threats over Russian oil, and COTSA sanctions would force India to cut ties with Moscow. But this exposed a fundamental misunderstanding of India's strategic DNA. Whenever India is pressured, it defends its autonomy more aggressively. Unlike US allies such as Japan, the UK, Australia, or South Korea, India does not operate as a compliant ally. When the US tried to treat India like a junior partner, New Delhi pushed back. Because India cooperates only as long as its sovereignty is respected, the moment autonomy is threatened, India pivots away. The US also misread the Russian oil issue. Washington assumed that Russia's economy and war effort were surviving because of India's oil purchases, so punishing India would force it to stop. But this ignored basic reality: Russian oil controls India's inflation and keeps its economy stable. Cutting it would hurt India far more immediately than it would hurt Russia. The US was essentially telling India, you must hurt your own economy because Russia is fighting a war in Ukraine. So India chose national interest over American pressure and moved even closer to Russia to secure long-term energy stability. All of this could have been avoided if the US had quietly negotiated price caps, coordinated with India, and avoided publicly shaming it. And politically, India cannot afford to look weak or submissive under foreign pressure. Ironically, before this escalation, the US was actually gaining ground. India was buying more American weapons than Russian ones. From Apaches and Chinooks to drones, howitzers, and even talks of the F-35, which is crazy because the US normally blocks F-35 access, even to close allies. The American working model is simple. First, force a country to join a military bloc. Second, turn it into a frontline state against US adversaries. Third, demand military bases on its territory. This model was applied to Pakistan successfully. The US tried the same with India. First, it pushed India to join a military bloc. India said no, accepting only a strategic and diplomatic arrangement like the Quad. Second, the US wanted India to become a frontline state against China, just as Pakistan once was against the Soviet Union. India rejected that role as well. Finally, the US wanted military bases in India, but New Delhi made it absolutely clear that no foreign power would ever be allowed to establish bases on Indian soil. The same rule was applied even to Russia. Despite far older and deeper ties, India never allowed Russian bases either. India understood that allowing this would destroy its precious strategic autonomy. To New Delhi, the US approach felt like conditional support with strategic strings attached, unlike Russia's. And this behavior was not limited to the Trump administration alone. Across the US political spectrum, India faces lectures on democracy, human rights, Ukraine, and oil, while history is conveniently ignored. There was a time when a democratic US was hostile toward India, while a communist Soviet Union stood ready to defend it. This shaped a lasting belief in New Delhi: the US wants dependency, not partnership. The double game was also visible. The US sheltered anti-India elements tied to Khalistani extremism, used it as leverage, armed Pakistan, and then saw those weapons turned against India. Trump's 50% tariffs before key Indo-US engagements and public praise for Pakistan's generals only reinforced one message for India: Washington wanted one-way access, not equality. Threats of sanctions, interference, and treating India as a project instead of a partner became fatal miscalculations. So why did India move closer to Russia again? Not out of blind loyalty, but because Russia proved reliable in crises. It offered technology without constant conditions, imposed no sanctions, avoided interference in India's internal affairs, treated India as a sovereign pole, stood by it in 1971, and did not block critical supplies during COVID. In short, the US wanted strategic obedience. India wanted strategic respect, and Russia offered that respect. India has now learned its lesson. America's attitude, at its core, hasn't truly changed since 1971. The flashy defense deals and the so-called strategic partnership now feel like a show. Underneath it all, the US has been playing the long game, containing China while ensuring India never becomes the next China. Going forward, US-India ties will remain purely transactional, much like India's relationship with China today. India's policy will most likely be engagement without trust and cooperation without alignment.